Let's get into it. This was a phenomenal day of football. I loved it. First and foremost, I grew up in Colorado, played at the University of Colorado. I have not seen Folsom Field like that, save for maybe twice. Yeah, probably just twice in its history. I go back to 2001 when Colorado beat Nebraska. This, of course, was Thanksgiving week. It put Colorado in the Big 12 championship game. They beat them 62-36 when Nebraska was ranked number 1. That's probably the greatest environment in the history of Folsom Field. Having said that, the day at Colorado on Saturday was electric. And it was epic from start to finish. Big noon kickoff, of course, was there. Kids were out there at 6, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. They were getting breakfast. It was unbelievable. By the way, big noon kickoff, Colorado students coming back. I know game day is going to be there as well, but big noon kickoff, just remember, we're the OG of the year. We were there first. We put you on the air first. We put you on the air second. We brought our studio show there first. Make sure to go there and check out the big noon kickoff, guys, on Saturday morning. The environment was incredible. You could feel it. It was like Colorado was ready to erupt. The fan base was ready to erupt, in particular because of this offseason, all the hype surrounding Coach Prime, and then the home debut and coming off the win over TCU. And it was electric. Now we get to the game. And the game was not electric. Let's face it. It was sloppy and poorly played early in the game from both teams. Both teams. Nebraska, clearly, all the turnovers on the offensive side. They need a lot of help on the offensive side. And it starts with like just getting the snap. Colorado, sloppy offensively. Now they win 36-14. And here's what's so remarkable about the performance from Colorado on Saturday is they didn't even play well at all and won going away. Really should have been like 42-7. You know, that's really what the game was like 42-45-7, something along those lines. Colorado was not great in the red zone. They were not disciplined, had far too many penalties. Now, they did capitalize on some turnovers, and I don't want to suggest that like every single time they play, they would be able to be the beneficiary of some of those turnovers, because those turnovers were unforced errors for the most part on Nebraska and their quarterback, Jeff Sims. But here we are sitting 2 games into the season, and Coach Prime has doubled the win total from a year ago. Not hard, obviously. They were 1-11. I've told you countless times how bad Colorado was last year, and it's still staggering to me. I say these numbers all the time, and it's still staggering to me because they lost by an average of 29. Okay, they're 1-11. They faced 7 ranked opponents, lost those games by an average of 36. Their last 4, when it's like, oh, you know, like no hope, they lost by an average of 41.5. Shedeur Sanders comes in, retools the roster. They're 2-0 and ranked 18th in the country. They welcome Nebraska in with their heralded new coach, Matt Rule, and handled them not even playing well. Not even playing well. The mark of a really good team is a team that can win handily when they don't even come close to playing their best. And that wasn't even close to what Colorado showed the week before, in particular on the offensive side against TCU. So, at least in my estimation, like, there's still room for growth. We didn't see a complete game against TCU. They beat the defending national runner-up on the road to open the season. See a really poorly executed game against a Power 5 opponent and a rival in Nebraska, win going away. This is a really good team. They're ranked 18th, and they should be. This is not a gimmick. Those of you waiting for this to crash and the slipper to not fit, or whatever you want to call it, right? The Cinderella story. This is not going away because Colorado is a very good team. The evidence is you play that poorly and win going away against Nebraska. Colorado was held without a point in their first 4 drives, all right? Didn't score until the 4:20 mark of the second quarter, and then they end up scoring 36 points. So, like, that's pretty explosive after that. Think of what they did after those first 4 drives. They end up scoring, and then at least if you eliminate mop-up duty, right? If the starters played about those last 8 series that the starters played, at least when Shedeur was still in, Shedeur Sanders, what did they do? Oh, they just scored 7 of 8 times. So, like, the offense found a rhythm. They found a little bit of a run game after halftime. Shedeur calmed down a little bit, found some completions, and Xavier Weaver's going off for over 100 yards. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, yeah, here we go. Colorado's offense is right up there, about to score 40 points again. They need to be better in the red zone. That obviously was an issue for them. They only scored 3 touchdowns and 6 red zone trips. That's not going to cut it. They still don't have the margin that the top echelon teams in college football have. So they still need to take care of business when it comes to things like scoring touchdowns in the red zone. 3 touchdowns and 6 red zone trips is not going to cut it. By the way, one of those field goals, they had first and goal from the 1 and settled for a field goal. Can't have that. Shedeur at times was taking sacks that he shouldn't have. Happened on that series, by the way. First and goal from the 1. They throw the ball. It's incomplete. They run it. They get stuffed. Then they try to throw it again. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this might be 4-down territory. Like, why wouldn't you go for it on 4th and 1, go back to the run game on 4th down? He takes a big sack, forces his coach's hand, happens to be his dad, into kicking that field goal. Things like that will get better. Wasn't even his best game, almost threw for 400 yards. Shedeur Sanders, at this point in the season, has put himself, I think, squarely within the top 3 conservatively in the Heisman Trophy conversation. You have to start with Caleb Williams, and we'll get to that in a moment because we're going to talk about USC in this show. But Shedeur Sanders is in that conversation. There's no doubt about it. You think of the numbers that he's put up, the fact that he has not turned the ball over. He's playing remarkably well. I mentioned the penalties earlier, and that was part of this lack of discipline, frankly, from Colorado. And listen, Deion the whole week was talking about this is personal, this is personal, this is personal. Nebraska goes out there, they stand on the 50. Shedeur's out there, he's showing them his watch. They get it. Nobody played disciplined. You can't have 9 penalties for 80 yards, 4 false starts, 4 unsportsmanlike conducts. One was offsetting, so kind of mitigates that. An unnecessary roughness, stuff like that. Those type of penalties are not what I would call effort penalties. Those are controllable penalties. You can't, unsportsmanlike conduct is a controllable penalty. That's a discipline deal. You've got to be willing as a player to not react. That's all it is. You've got to have a stronger will than the opponent. You've got to be willing to not react for the sake of your team. Even if you feel like affronted as a man, doesn't matter. You can't react. False starts, totally in their control. So all of these penalties are fixable issues. All right. If you go out there and you just have like 8 holding calls, it's like, that's kind of tough. We'll try not to hold, but obviously like that goes against you at times. This is not PI, which is just kind of pop up. Those are effort penalties. Guys are trying hard. They get a hold. You get a DPI, an OPI, something along those lines. 4 false starts, 4 unsportsmanlike penalties. Like, you can correct that in a week, and they need to. And they need to if they're going to go through the rest of their schedule, and more on that in a moment. The only other part that was a bit alarming, and I touched on it for a moment, was the sacks. They're going to have to protect the quarterback better. As poorly as Nebraska played on the offensive side, they played really well on the defensive side. I'm a big fan of defensive coordinator Tony White at Nebraska and what he's doing with that side of the ball. I know they gave up 36. I know they gave up scores in 7 of the last 8 drives, but their game plan initially, before they started getting worn out, was very good. They were stopping the run with the defensive front 7 and 6 at times. They were getting pressure with that 6-man front and sometimes just a 4-man and 3-man rush. Like, those are things that are going to give Colorado a lot of problems. And you saw Shedeur. This is when I know a quarterback is uncomfortable. His feet started to move faster than they were against TCU, and he started to pat the ball. I know exactly how comfortable a quarterback is based on how many times he's patting the ball. He doesn't see it. It's all muddy. And Nebraska did a great job of that. They were mixing coverage and pressure. and it forced Shedeur to hold the ball, and he took too many sacks. They're going to have to clean that up for Colorado. And all that being said, they win 36-14. Like, they are a really good team. Absolutely a top 20 team, which is remarkable. You think about where this program is. Why were there 10 million people, close to 10 million people watching that game on Saturday? By the way, just more people watched the Colorado-Nebraska game than Bama-Texas. You think people aren't interested in Deion Sanders and Colorado and this story? This story is transcending all of sports. That's probably why you're listening to this right now. You see like the title, and it's like, oh, he's going to talk about Prime and Colorado. Of course I'm going to listen to it. You should see the numbers from the podcast last week. You see the numbers on the game. It's staggering how interested people are in watching what's going on. And it's because of the level of ineptitude that Colorado was displaying a year ago and where they're at now. They're 2-0, a bona fide top 20 team. Just handled Nebraska, not even playing well, 36-14, and they are in the mix for the best recruits in the country. It's not this is wild. This is wild. Bryce Underwood, number one player in the country, quarterback from the state of Michigan in the class of 2025, visiting Colorado when they play USC. Like, when was the last time the number one player in the country visited Colorado? I think it was probably either like Darnell Scott in like 2007 or Marcus Houston. Was Marcus Houston? I mean, he was like the number one running back. This is in the class of 2000. This hasn't happened at Colorado. They used to have studs. Colorado in the late 80s and 90s, they were right up there with anybody in the country as far as placing talent in the NFL. That's obviously not been the case over the last 2 decades. Now, here we are. It's 2023. Deion Sanders is the head coach of the University of Colorado. They're 2-0. They're number 18 in the country. And they've got the best players in the country walking in, calling them to take visits to Folsom Field and to visit Boulder, Colorado. A year ago today, basically this week, they're coming off a 31-point loss to Air Force, team in their own state. And now you're getting the number one player in the country in 2025 to come visit your school. You're 2-0. That's why 10 million people are watching, because we've never seen this. We've never seen anything like this. And it's not a Cinderella because, like I said, they played bad and won big. I'm losing the ability to try to contextualize this. We just have to start facing up to the fact. All of us, everybody. It's like we got to stop, I should say, talking about the roster flip. And like, is this going to work? What's going to happen? They're just a really good team. Really good quarterback. He's in the top 3 of the Heisman Trophy race. Gonna be tough, though. I'll just say, like, people have asked me already that are Colorado fans, like, hey, are we going to win 10 games? I don't know about that. Why? 6 of the remaining 10 games are against ranked opponents because the Pac-12 just became the toughest conference in college football. Maybe they don't have the best team in college football, but this is hands down, and I've been saying it for weeks, basically since the preseason, this is the deepest conference in college football. And now you look at the remaining opponents for Colorado. They're going to have to go travel to Autzen Stadium and face 13th ranked Oregon. Then they host USC. Later in the year, they've got to go to UCLA. They host Oregon State. UCLA is now ranked 24. Oregon State's ranked 16. They're going to host them. They got to travel to Washington State, who just beat Wisconsin on their home field, before hosting Utah, who's ranked 12th and the defending 2-time Pac-12 champion, to end the season. That's a ridiculous schedule. If I was handicapping it right now, I would put them at like over under 7.5. I'm going over that. I think that they're kind of like that 8 right now. Don't tell Deion. By the way, he might play this for the team because he's using anything and everything as motivation to fight complacency within that program, which is having a lot of success now early. But you look at that schedule, man, that's going to be really, really tough. Really, really tough. And they're making everybody else's schedule really, really tough. I mean, imagine Oregon and you're like, oh, okay, we just barely beat Texas Tech on the road. And yeah, you could see that one being a struggle. And now we're going to host Colorado with a guy who's in the Heisman conversation and a defense that just obliterated Nebraska. But of course, it's not a great Nebraska offense. But you get what I'm saying. They just made everybody's schedule very, very tough.